Okay, ready and go.
In his novel, Brave New World, Aldous Huxley goes to great lengths to bring the tension between the fine line between utopia and dystopia. In the world state, society of Brave New World, the members of the population are conditioned from the beginning of their lives to fit a rigid societal structure and to love what they do. The members of the... Admittedly, at first look, government controlled with citizens appears to be immoral. We are a culture where we pride ourselves on liberty, freedom, equality, and opportunity. So mere suggestions of institutionalized psychological manipulation, understandably, may be instantly cast aside as unethical. However, the question calls for us to remove ourselves from our predisposed ideas and approach the matter objectively. Thus, we take the position that government control of the population is justifiable, and the Society of Brave New World serves as a perfect example of that. In order to qualify this claim, we must examine the question from multiple lenses. Control mechanisms in Brave New World do improve social stability. Due to hypnopaedia, people are content with their place in the social hierarchy. When Lenina remarks that she would hate to be a member of the lower classes, Henry Foster tells her, if you were an epsilon, your conditioning would have made you no less thankful you were an beta or an alpha, page 74. Though we may consider alphas and betas of a higher class, the beauty of the controlled society is that the gammas, deltas, and epsilons don't view it the same way. Historically, societal unrest comes from class conflict. The French Revolution of 1789, the Russian Revolution of 1917, and the more recent Arab Spring are all real-world conflicts directly associated with class experience. Death tolls for these revolutions reached 40,000 for French, 800,000 for Russian, and over 30,000 in the Arab Spring according to USnews.com. And these casualties, totaling 870,000 between all three, are directly tied to the existence of class dissatisfaction. Although classes do exist in Brave New World, class conflict does not, solely due to control mechanisms. No matter their social standing, whether they be alpha or an epsilon, people are conditioned to be happy with their station in life, eliminating any problems traditionally with class dissatisfaction. Similarly, the economic conditions of the world state justify control mechanisms. Much as society is stable, so too is the economy. In the popular hypnopaedic proverb, ending is better than mending, the more stitches, the less riches, page 49, citizens are conditioned to throw out old clothes and buy new products as often as possible. This conditioning is responsible for boosting the economy perpetually, so that citizens are constantly earning and spending, producing and consuming, making the economy forever static and stable. Furthermore, when approached futuristically, the stability of the society and economy lends itself to cultural longevity. The society can and will last, another reason of justification. Due to its social stability, economic prosperity, and futuristic sustainability, control mechanisms, like those seen in Brave New World, are justified.
Who's doing cross? Ready? Go.
So you admitted that there is an ethical issue with the controlling mechanisms. Are you then arguing this from a purely political and economic standpoint?
I don't think it's purely ethical. I think there's definitely different components to it. And since the question is just whether it's justifiable, not whether it's perfect, we found that our strongest points would come from economic and social lenses. But we do believe that ethical also aids our side, because we think that it makes people happier, the control mechanisms, which we will prove later in the debate, that these control mechanisms allow people to be happy, it's peaceful, and those are all ethical issues, and those only happen because of control mechanisms.
If there's no class conflict, why does Bernard constantly argue and have to fight with those of lower classes?
I think Bernard is definitely an exception to the rule. He is a social outlier, which is the only cause for his dissatisfaction. Bernard is probably...
Okay. Let's get our con speaker going. She's resetting. Hang on. Go get back to 2 minutes. Can you double check with you? All right? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, ready, go.
The purpose of all political association is the preservation of the natural and imprescriptible rights of man. These rights are liberty, property, security, and a resistance to oppression. John Locke. Aldous Huxley's Brave New World presents a battle between two options, that of social stability and that of ethicality. But in a world with no free will, no liberty or identity, the end cannot justify the means. When methods such as conditioning and genetic modification are used to model a human into a desired form, individualism and free will are eliminated. As key character Bernard says on page 89, "I'd rather be myself and nasty, not someone else, however jolly." Everyone deserves this choice, the ability to choose who and how they want to be. But the controlling mechanisms in Brave New World remove that right. A government which removes an individual's ability to create their own personality is one that no longer protects its citizens, but rather oppresses them into near nothingness. The government in Brave New World has employed these practices in order to halt progress and maintain its own power. Without individuality and independent learning, there are no new ideas or true education. And yes, without radical minds, there's unlikely to be radical social upheaval. But without the ability to fend for oneself, the basic human rights can also be taken, as they are in Brave New World. If a government simply rubs out these liberties and dissolves its purpose, can any controlling method be justified? As in every dystopian novel, Huxley's protagonists come face to face with the leader of their world. It is in this scene that it is suggested that the world is justifiable because people are happy, page 220. And yet the greatest flaw in this statement is that the people, of the citizens of this world, are not happy. Their preconditioned brains are still capable of negative thoughts, but they are taught to consume the drug soma to banish their unhappiness. The very fact that citizens use the universal drug soma daily demonstrates that the citizens are unhappy, because they are continuously using the drug to banish negative thoughts. Despite the dehumanizing methods of such a controlling government, its people are still unhappy, proving the failure of the government to fulfill its purpose. In a poll done by the Washington Post in 2012, out of over 3,000 Americans, 58% desired a small federal government over a large one. The same poll revealed that 60% of Americans agree with the statement, "Government controls too much of our daily lives." Brave New World presents a government with control of the entire globe and every aspect of its citizens' lives, from their height to their social standing. The Washington Post suggests that our society would rebel against the government in Brave New World, and there's a reason for that. It goes against our basic common values. To our world, that government and its controlling mechanisms would be considered oppressive, or, in other terms, unjustifiable. Huxley's Brave New World hides its destructive nature behind the facade of a utopia. However, its failure to serve its purpose and the impossibility of its success in our own society reveals that its controlling methods are unnecessary and unpardonable. When a government fails to serve its people and instead oppresses them, it becomes unjustifiable.
All right, 1 minute cross starts now.
So do you consider the ethical component of your debate the most important part?
Well, we considered that even if you have social stability, if there aren't any, if their controlling mechanisms eliminate individuality and independent people, then the stability of the economy and the stability of the political aspects are kind of canceled out because you don't have people with independent thought that are being protected. There's no true citizens if everyone's just a robot to their conditioning.
Also, given that the question is it justifiable, I believe ethics, which is determining what's right and what's wrong, is a very important part of this debate.
Do you guys think that John the Savage helps or hinders your argument?
I think he definitely helps our argument because he is the only person in the world state that has been exposed to the savage world first rather than the world state. So he sees the oppression and how wrong what they're doing is.
Timing, 2 minute regrouping time, go. First rebuttal, go.
It appears as though my opponents are caught up with the ethicality of the dilemma. But once again, we find the importance to reiterate that to consider the ethicality of mind control is to be narrow-minded and closed off from the real benefits of mass control mechanisms. We are conditioned to think that control over others via physiological ways is unjust. But the benefits for the society seen in the book from these measures is undeniable. Despite what my opponents may claim, it is irrefutable that the world state has content, productive, and peaceful citizens. Furthermore, my opponents claim that the citizens of Brave New World are truly unhappy. To evaluate this claim, we must look to the story of Helmholtz, an individual of what my opponents are painting is a society of unhappy clones. But ultimately, Helmholtz is nothing more than a starving artist looking for something more in his life. In this way, Helmholtz does defy his conditioning and is unhappy, finding true and well-founded discontent in the world state. But to truly evaluate and qualify Helmholtz's role in this debate, we must look to the end of his story. Because Helmholtz, along with Bernard, is offered a life on an island, removed from the world state in a community of similar-minded people. The treatment of citizens like Helmholtz is imperative in fully understanding the effectiveness of unhappy citizens as evidence against my position in this debate. Rather than being treated harshly or unfairly, Helmholtz is offered a better life, where he can make his artistic dreams come true. The beauty in the world state is that it does not punish citizens for insurrection, but rather offers them an alternative to maintain a larger societal stability of keeping the larger society happy. It is in fact people like Helmholtz who defy their conditioning that become the leaders of the world state, as Mustafa Mann testifies. Now, my opponents, namely Kaylee, also told us that John supports their argument. They have drawn on John in attempts to support their argument. It is recognized that of all the significant characters in the novel, John is the only one not subject to control mechanisms of the world state. Thus, John is our only representative from the novel of people that have traditional freedom, a freedom that we hold dear. And what a story that is, because John is the only character to stab a man, to instigate a riot, to kill someone else, and to ultimately end his own life. Above all, John was unhappy, in spite of control mechanisms, but because he was not exposed to them. And more importantly, John is unhappy in both the world state and the society of the savage reservations, where in the savage reservations he's given all the freedom and choice he wants. This is important as it...
All right. We are ready for cross now.
Okay, one of the points you brought up was that this society is perfect because if you're an individual, you're sent away onto one of these islands, correct? Then why is John, an individual, forced to stay in London where he's unhappy because he's in an unnatural state where he kills himself?
Once again, I think John is definitely an outlier to the equation because he was born in the savage reservations, and to rely on him is to say that lack of control mechanisms produces unhappiness because, as I said, above everything, John is unhappy. We understand that they kind of kept him around, and we can't really qualify that. Mustafa Mann never really gives us a reason, so going down that line of reasoning doesn't really make sense. It's kind of illogical to think about theoreticals in the book. But for citizens of the world state that were conditioned, like Bernard and Helmholtz, who then found unhappiness, real unhappiness in the world state, they are given a better life. And because you guys are definitely attacking the ethicality of the issue, we just think it's important to bring up that those people that are...
Alright, let's get our call and rebuttal up. 3 minutes, go.
One of the first points I would like to bring up in their argument is that they believe this society to be perfectly stable. However, it's not. It is completely dependent on a drug, soma. This can be seen when John removes, or doesn't even fully remove, but threatens to remove this drug from a group of epsilons. They riot and turn violent after having this crutch threatened with being removed. This shows how dependent that this society is, and without soma, it would fall apart. Now, these control mechanisms also go against modern principles of liberty. As Marquis de Lafayette says, a prominent philosopher on political theory, true republicanism is the sovereignty of the people. There are natural and imprescriptible rights which an entire nation has no right to violate. Yet that is exactly what this society does. While it does have good intentions of trying to provide security, it's not justifiable. As Aldous Huxley, the author of this book, was quoted saying, "Hell isn't merely paved with good intentions, it's walled and roofed with them, yes, and furnished too." In the attempt to provide security, they create a hell for these people in which individualism is eliminated. These people are not people. They are simply clones that are manufactured. It's why Lenina is constantly referred to as a piece of meat and not as a person with any individualistic personality. There's also a quote from Benjamin Franklin, which is very relevant, and it says, "Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety." This is because their morals, in which they try to set up with integrity, is compromised the second it is threatened. Benjamin Franklin was also quoted saying, "Freedom of speech is a principal pillar of a free government. When this support is taken away, the constitution of a free society is dissolved and tyranny is erected on its ruins." And that is exactly what this society is. It is dominated by a government which no longer serves the people, but instead some ideological notion in which the only thing that matters is that a society is stable. Now, the other issue with this stable society in which there is no change is that there's no change, there's no progress. The society does not adapt, but simply focuses on preserving what it has now. That is why anyone that would challenge their thoughts is exiled onto islands and not allowed to pursue these thoughts. The only people allowed to run the government are those with free thought, but that choose to go with what the society says and not truly think freely, but come to the conclusions that have already been made.
That the use of soma is proof of a citizen's unhappiness, correct?
Yes, it's a crutch because it directly addresses being unhappy, since it's a drug that provides a sort of false happiness.
Also, it's not exactly, it's proof because they use it, but also they suppress the negative thoughts so they don't know anything else besides being happy.
But soma in itself is a control mechanism, right?
Yes.
Then isn't soma a control mechanism inherently responsible for happiness?
Yes, but it's also responsible for causing the people to ignore any flaw with the society instead of correcting the flaw.
Then isn't that social stability because of a control mechanism?
The control mechanism proves that the people are already unhappy. So you can suppress their unhappiness, but it doesn't mean that the society is actually stable, because you still have a bunch of unhappy people. They're just suppressing it.
We also don't believe it's justifiable because it requires the people to be ignorant instead of knowing fully about their society.
2-minute regrouping.
To reiterate our previous points, personal happiness, world peace, and economic stability are all achieved through government control in Brave New World. The world state exemplifies the potential that other societies could reach if they too implemented these tactics effectively. The people are personally happy because they are conditioned to believe it, and their perception becomes a reality. Also, they are provided with a safe drug that provides no nasty side effects and causes them to stop worrying and relax. World peace is also achieved through some of the same methods. The people are conditioned to be happy, so no violent outbreaks should occur. However, there are teams in place to take care of riots in a humane manner when they do occasionally become a problem. Economic stability is reached through government influence to buy and sell for an equal profit and deficit, thus creating a static economy. This stability is prosperous for citizens because they do not need to worry about their economic status, which is a source of great stress for most U.S. citizens. According to the New York Times, in the past 100 years, approximately 108 million people have died or more. According to the Washington Post, 1.2 billion people don't have access to medicine, 121 million people suffer from depression, and 21,000 people die of hunger or hunger-related causes worldwide. In our own country, we are $17 trillion in debt and spend $594 billion on war each year. In 2013, the U.S. Census Bureau reported that 45.3 million U.S. citizens fall below the poverty line, while 49.9 million don't have access to health insurance. These days, it's hard not to be discouraged by U.S. politics, as political polarization seems to be grinding our country to a halt. And political stagnation is not an imagined threat. The Pew Research Institute found that approximately 1/3 of each party views the other as a genuine threat to American stability. And there is a threat to stability. but not just in America, in the entire world. But this threat does not come from politics of an opposing political party, but from ourselves. The truth is, our world is flawed and has serious problems with much room for improvement. It is with control mechanisms, like those seen in Brave New World, that poverty, civil unrest, individual pain and unhappiness, economic inequality, and lack of adequate and sufficient health care can be solved. We acknowledge that there seems to be something inherently wrong with control mechanisms. However, the people in Brave New World are happy and live in a society that is arguably better than our own, justifying the control mechanisms relied upon in the creation of their society.
All right, let's get our last speaker up.
A distinction must be made between protective restrictions for a people and full-blown mind control. In Brave New World, the lines are not merely blurred, but they weren't even there to begin with. The world state in which Lenina, Bernard, Helmholtz, and John are a part of places every ounce of power into the hands of 10 calculating world controllers. John, being the only person who was physically born rather than created in a factory, and who lived in the savage world prior to being exposed to the world state, is the only person who sees the oppression of the Brave New World. Drugs and sex are encouraged as the state uses them to give the people, who are conditioned to love and appreciate their immutable social standings, an illusion of freedom, when in reality, freedom is nothing more than a 7-letter word. John Locke said, "Whenever the power that is put into any hands of the government of the people and the protection of our properties is applied to other ends, it presently becomes tyranny, whether those that thus use it are one or many." Also, my opponent brought up that Soma keeps the people happy and it keeps the people happy and suppressed, where the cost of happiness is too high. It requires ignorance and no freedom, or it requires ignorance in order to take the drug. Also, it lessens the lifespan of all the people in the society. Now, the supposedly justifiable argument for the total control of this population of genetically manufactured people is that by encouraging the consumption of soma and promiscuity, the government is able to keep everyone satisfied and at the same time keep their own hands clean. But what is true happiness to a people that have known nothing besides what they've been conditioned to believe? Because the reader will never truly know the answer to this question, the mass tyranny of the totalitarian world state cannot be justified. What's more is that people like Helmholtz and Bernard, who are both in the highest class of the rigid caste system, are capable of negative and individual thoughts that the government insists do not exist. And John, the ultimate outcast, has an exchange with Mustafa Mond, a dangerously smart world controller, in which Mond explains that people prefer the comfort of the hallucinations of freedom and happiness as opposed to the inconveniences of reality. John fires back by saying, "But I don't want comfort. I want God and poetry and real danger and freedom and goodness. I want sin." Mond snaps back that in desiring these things, John is giving his consent to unhappiness. "All right then," John resolves, "I'm claiming the right to be unhappy." And this twisted utopia of conditioning and happiness found through an addiction to soma is anything but a perfect world. No one in their right mind would ever stand for this kind of oppression, except for the Brave New World citizens. They may think they're happy, but it's just the soma talking.